All right. Nice to see everyone coming in. My name is Andrea Medina Smith, and I am one of the many co-chairs of Engaging Researchers with Research Data Interest Group here at RDA. Very quickly, I will get started. We have a lot to go over today. So let's get to the correct screen. So your co-chairs are Connie Claire, Brianna Ezra, Raman Ganguly, Eva Gergely, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your last names, myself, Andrea Medina Smith, Ellie Papadopoulou, James Savage, Shannon Sheridan, and Joanne Yeomans. If you have any questions for us, we're going to be taking our questions from the collaborative notes, which Brianna has posted in the chat box. Please go in there and sign in so we know that you are here. And that's where we'll be taking questions just so that we can have them for posterity. And we're also kind of afraid with all the content we're going to be delivering today that we won't have time to answer all the questions. So we'd like to capture all those and answer them. A couple more housekeeping notes. One, the session is being recorded and it's going to be made available on the RDA website. We request that you mute yourself and also keep your camera off. We have found out that in the recording, if you happen to have your camera on in the recording, it's going to be captured, even if you're not speaking or one of the speakers. So I bet you a lot of us don't want, our lunch plans broadcast all over the RDA website. So just keep your camera off. That would be very helpful. We'd love for you to engage in the session by asking questions in the notes document and taking part in the discussion during the session and after. We'll continue any questions there. If you have comments that you'd like to make, feel free to use the chat function. And finally, to enlarge the slides, if you haven't been told this already, there is a box with two arrows pointing in on the bottom right-hand side of every screen within the screen. So that's the expand screen icon, and that'll make the screens quite large. And then you click it again to shrink it back down so you can see my beautiful face once more. All right. Our agenda for today is we're going to have I'm going to give a quick overview of our past activities. We'll have a keynote from our co-chair, Connie Claire. We'll have some updates from our task forces, and then 4 lightning talks from various group members. And we'll have a couple closing remarks, and hopefully we are going to have a few minutes for questions, but we'll see. Very quickly, this is our 3rd plenary as a official interest group at RDA. We started with the Birds of a Feather group at plenary number 14, I believe, at Helsinki. That could have been 15. And the type of work that we've been doing is based on a work group that came out of the Libraries Interest Group, Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. And that work was brought together in what we called a cookbook. It's a cookbook for engaging with researchers, and it has different case studies from all over the world looking at how mostly libraries, but also other data management faculties engage with their researchers. It's great. It's open access, so you can see the book online. Connie has helpfully put the link to it in the chat. And so since then, we've been sort of regrouping, figuring out where we can go next. That has occurred with movement from 2 task forces. One of which is looking to update the cookbook with resources and engagement online, and Joanne will give us a great update on that. And then we've also been looking at making podcasts to give you the information in a different way. A lot of those the podcasts will take from both the cookbook, speaking with case studies, people who wrote the case studies for the cookbook, and also hopefully some new case studies. So Shannon and Brianna will be giving an update on that. And now I think it might be time for the keynote from Connie. All right, Connie, are you ready?
I think so. Can everybody see me? Yeah, I'm back on now. So I'll just share my screen. Thank you. See some thumbs up. That's always good. Okay, share the screen. So you should all be able to see my presentation slides now. So I can't see anybody, so please just shout up if anybody can't see or hear me at the moment. It's great to be here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Great to be here as a co-chair, but also to deliver this keynote, which is about 4TU research data and building the community. So I'd just like to let you know that I've put the link to the slides in the Google document. You can access these afterwards. And if you do have any questions after this session, please feel free to email me. So I'm Connie Clare, and I joined the team at 4TU Research Data as the community manager around 6 months ago now, so in October last year. And before that, I studied a PhD in developmental biology at the University of Nottingham in the UK. So the reason you can see some sheep here is because I was studying maternal nutrition, so what the mother eats and how this affects embryonic development. And I used sheep and cattle as a biological model. And then this second photo is quite humorous. This is myself and one of my PhD colleagues as we're suited and booted, ready to go down to the barn to feed and blood sample the sheep. And then you can see in this bottom right-hand corner, this is Delft University of Technology Library. It's quite an iconic building there. And you can see this is here because back in 2019, I traveled to Delft and was there as an intern for 3 months, working with the data stewards and the data champions to find out more about what they do to advocate for good research data management practice and open science within their faculties and departments. So that's enough about me. Things I'd like to cover in this session is I'd like to introduce you to 4TU Research Data, which is a data repository, and talk a bit about the partnership that is actually driving the agenda of the repository, and also to share some technical features. But then I'm interested in talking more about the community around the repository, so why the community is important, and share some of the plans and programming, which has mainly involved working closely with the data stewards. And then I'll move on to sharing some ideas that we have for reward and recognition of researchers and support staff. So first of all, what is 4TU Research Data? So it's an international data repository for science, engineering, and design disciplines. And the repository is available to researchers all around the world. So any researcher in any institution can deposit their data in 4TU Research Data. And it aims to facilitate the curation, sharing, access, and long-term preservation of research data. And historically, it's always had the core trust seal of approval. So it's a trusted and certified repository. And we're in the process of renewing this core trust seal at the moment. And the repository was founded over a decade ago now, so back in 2010, as an initiative of the 4TU Federation. So 4TU stands for 4 technical universities, and 3 of those universities are driving the agenda of the repository itself. So this is Delft University of Technology, Eindhoven University of Technology, and the University of Twente. And it's been great to see that over the past decade or so, we now have more than 8,400 technical science data sets deposited within 4TU Research Data. And if we take a look at the snapshot of the portal, you can see that we have data sets from a diversity of different disciplines. So from mathematics through to agriculture and veterinary sciences, from information and computing through to business management. So the mission of 4TU Research Data and the importance of the community, and specifically working with the data stewards as disciplinary experts, is to try and build and create tailored discipline-specific solutions for fair data. So I'm sure most of you in the audience are aware of the fair data principles that were published in 2016. This means that we want to help researchers to make their data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So the repository aims to provide a trusted, safe and secure place for the long-term preservation of research data. But not just data, we're also interested in the publishing of code. So we have a full integration with GitHub, and this summer we're looking to integrate GitLab to help researchers with publishing versions of software code. And for every data or code deposit, it's assigned with a persistent identifier, so a DOI, which we know that can help linking of data to manuscripts and other resources and can really help with the findability of data. We know that data publication and citation, whether it's citation of your own data sets in your own manuscripts or the work of others, can really help to increase the impact and visibility of researchers' work. And a new feature that's been implemented over the last couple of years is restricted access. So researchers that are collecting personal or confidential or commercially sensitive data can actually publish this under embargo for a temporary or a permanent period of time. And one thing that we offer at 4TU Research Data is a personal service of like a metadata or data review. So every single submission of data or code goes to two of the back office team members, Jan and Eric, who go through and make sure that all of the metadata is as complete as possible. So making sure that the data is attached with a README file, for instance, that they have a descriptive title, a clear abstract, categories and keywords, a license, and also an ORCID. So this is like a tick box quality control check to make sure that the metadata is as complete as possible, which helps to make the data as fair as possible. And what we can also do is use the repository usage statistics from the back office to inform partners about how researchers are using the repository. And this is also quite important for reward and recognition, because we can provide researchers with information about how many times their data sets have been viewed, downloaded, and cited. And I should come back to that a little bit later. And it's important to note that all of this couldn't happen without the front and the back office staff members that are all pulling together to really maintain and manage the technical infrastructure. So at 4TU Research Data, whilst we realise that having a good technical infrastructure is great, on its own it's not enough to make data fair. So we need to work with communities, we need to work with researchers, and also the data support staff within the institutions. So we understand that proper research data management is the prerequisite to open science. So it's integral for research integrity and reproducibility. We know that the FAIR principles are now becoming a growing requirement of funders, journals, institutions, and policies around the world. So in order to help researchers to comply with these principles, then we need to have communities of data supporters around them. And because researchers are busy and they have a high administrative workload, they can't be expected to know how to use the latest tools or know about the latest services or policies within institutions. So we need to have those data support staff, such as data stewards, to help them to achieve this. And then with the sheer number of researchers and the diversity of different disciplines within these large research-intensive institutions, driving a cultural change from institutional management point of view is actually very difficult. So we need to have boots on the ground, so to speak, within faculties and departments that can help to drive this culture change. So this is reiterating the point that research communities and discipline-specific problems don't just affect one institution, so they cross institutional borders. And this is why at 4TU Research Data, we're aiming to build a community from within the repository out across these technical universities. So we believe in collaboration to solve the problems. So I just want to show you some of the plans and programming that have taken place to build the community since I started my position back in October last year. So as I've mentioned before, we'd like to capitalise on discipline-specific expertise. So each of these 3 technical universities, they each have embedded full-time data stewards, and they also have initiated open science communities, as well as this new theme of a digital competency centre where we have data managers and research software engineers at hand to help with the support network. We also want to build opportunities for engagement and education. So I'll talk a bit more about the working group shortly, but this is to bring those disciplinary personnel together and think about ideas to create workshops and webinars to raise awareness. And something that I'm particularly passionate about is trying to reward and recognise those that are doing a fantastic job. So we have an online community that is hosted by WordPress, as well as now a Slack community where we share stories about researchers, researcher support, collaborations, events and training opportunities, and we also have a monthly newsletter. And in orange, I've highlighted a couple of things that we're working on at the moment. So one of them will be a page to be more transparent about the repository statistics so that institutions can see more about the usage, and also a Slack backtrack. So we have some really interesting conversations within the Slack community that I would like to make available to a wider audience through the newsletter and the community platform. We also have a Fair Data Fund, and the call opens twice a year in spring and in autumn. So this is a fund of up to €3,500 that researchers can apply for to prepare and curate their data so that it can be published in 40U research data. And towards the end of the year, it would be nice if we can get here. It would be to launch a fellowship program. So this would be to recruit and embed fellows from the partner institutions and perhaps other institutions to work with us on fair data projects and advance the shared mission and vision of 40U research data. And then finally, I should mention that 40U research data is currently open to new partners. So we hope to welcome new institutions as partners, gold, silver and bronze members, and to provide them with consultancy. So this could be implementation of a data stewardship model, for instance, or starting up working groups and creating opportunities for workshops and webinars. So now I'd like to just share a bit of information about the core members. So I've been working quite closely with some of the data stewards from the 3 institutions, and I'm sure you'll know some familiar faces. Some of these are individuals who are actually very active within the RDA community. So we have Yan Wang, who is the coordinator. We have Case, Santosh, Yasmin, who's very active in this community, Diana, Nico, Heather, Jeff, and Esther. And Esther will be giving a lightning talk during this session on the carpentries. We also have 5 data stewards from the University of Twente who all joined and started their positions only last year in the pandemic. So we have Chan, who is the equivalent of Yan at Twente, so she's the coordinator, but she's also steward in 2 different departments. We have Mariana, who is the equivalent of Santosh at the University of Twente. We have Simona and Judith, who are working in their various departments. And then new to the team, only 2 weeks ago, we had Zafer, who joined, and he's not embedded within a faculty or a department, but he's interested in fair data in general. And then finally, we have 6 data stewards from the University of Eindhoven. So Chef is the longest standing data steward. And then we have Sil and Anna, and then Chiara, Fung and Flor. They joined the team only at the beginning of this year, so they're not yet embedded. But what you can see from this overview is that we can matchmake the data stewards by their faculty or discipline or expertise, or by their interests. So in blue, highlighted underneath, are the interests that they share. So we can see that there are interests in personal data and privacy and GDPR, as well as policy implementation and writing reproducible code. So the aim is to capitalize on this diverse and multidisciplinary skill set and bring this group together. So we have working groups. So we have the data stewards group, which, as I've just mentioned, we can matchmake based on discipline, based on interest. And the idea is to come together to exchange ideas and knowledge and experiences and best practice, and then eventually co-create resources, workflows, policies, and guidelines that can be rolled out across the 40U partner institutions. So the working groups come together on a monthly basis. So the first one is fair and reproducible code. And these are community-driven working groups. So these came out of discussions as to what were interesting for the data stewards to talk about. So this was more about tools and training opportunities. 4TU Research Data has a membership with the Carpentries and has had since 2018. So we talk about opportunities to deliver the Carpentries workshops at the partner institutions. We also talk about licensing of software code, tools for version control, such as GitHub and GitLab. And then in orange here, one of the outputs that we're currently working on is teaching and templates. So we're thinking of starting train the trainer sessions so that data stewards can teach one another on the best practices for writing reproducible code. And then hopefully we'll get to the stage where we can co-create a template. So this will be a minimum standard requirement that researchers need to follow in order to write fair and reproducible code. Another working group that we have is privacy and GDPR. So in this group, we come together to talk about archiving of personal or confidential data, how to deal with informed consent, who should help researchers with the forms, where they should be stored and for how long. We also talk about the integration of data stewards with other institutional teams, such as the legal and privacy teams, as well as the ethics teams. And then one of the outputs in orange has been started by one of our data stewards at Delft, Santosh. So he's been developing a data access committee and he's piloting it within his faculty. So if researchers want to request access to personal or confidential data, they can do this in a more regulated manner. And this could be good to roll out across the 4TU partner institutions as well. And then a final working group is engagement and education. So in this group, we talk about generic research data management courses, as well as disciplinary training that the data stewards provide. It's also a good place to share resources, talk about activities, and games to engage researchers. And one of the outputs that we're currently working on is a collection of disciplinary use cases, because we realize that there are some subtle differences and also commonalities across disciplines. So we hope that this can help data stewards to really engage researchers and help them with their workflows. So now I just wanted to demonstrate the community platform. So starting this position as a community manager virtually was quite challenging. So I wanted to create some space where we could come online and share the latest news, events, opportunities, successes, lessons learned. So we have a blog where we have researcher stories, research support stories, and then stories about collaboration. We also have a page for the different groups and information about the Fair Data Funds. And we also have a page for the newsletter archives, as well as details on upcoming community events and past events that we've attended. And under About, you can see things, information about the community and the repository more generally. So if we go to the community page, the idea was to really give some impact and visibility for the members so you can see who they are and what they do, where they work, and what their interests are, and you can get connected with them. So you can actually scroll and look for researchers, data stewards, community managers, data managers, research software engineers, and research supporters more generally. So if we take a look at some of the researcher profiles, I'm going to show Nadia Blomendals. So she works at VU in Amsterdam. So you can message Nadia or get connected. And you can also see her social media profiles. And the idea is to give some idea of a bio, so you can see who she is, where she works, and what her research is about. You can also see links to her data sets, which is on tropical cyclone research, and you can see her email address, so you can get in contact. And I think this is quite important when it comes to putting a face and a real person to the data set, so that you can actually reach out to them and ask questions. So if we take a look at the groups page, so we have a Slack channel now, we have a Slack workspace for the communications, but this is just a public place that you can come and read a bit more about some of the working groups, collaborations, and then we also have a social hour that runs once a month after work so that we can get to know each other a bit better. And then if we take a look at the blog, this is where we share the information about the researchers, research supporters, and any ongoing collaborations. So just to show you what a researcher story looks like, taking a look at this one, making Operation Air Data fair. So this is about a cohort of master's students who last year developed a COVID-19 ventilator, and they applied for the Fair Data funds to publish their software code and also their hardware, like technical specifications, online in the repository. So you can see there's a link to the data set. You can read more about the story and then access the data. So the general idea was to provide reward and recognition for data as a research output, to provide impact and visibility for community members, to allow multidisciplinary stakeholders to get connected, so bringing researchers with IT specialists, librarians, data support staff, and also to give the community some public presence to inform and inspire others, but also to share news from other communities within this space, because I think that's equally important to give attention to the other communities out there. So just to give you an overview of the newsletter, so you can subscribe to this, just to show you the kinds of things we like to share. So again, sharing researcher stories, research support stories, any features or updates about the repository that the community should be aware of, and any opportunities to join the teams or invitations to be part of initiatives or new vacancies from the partner institutions. We also like to give a space for the new members, so new data stewards, for instance, and again, sharing any events that we've attended that we enjoyed, but also highlighting upcoming events, and again, making it clear that this is not just about our community, but also showcasing the work of other communities. And something that I'd like to share, one thing that we've added only this month to the newsletter is a feature, Did You See These Data Sets? So each month we feature the top downloaded data sets in the newsletter from each of the partner institutions. And then also we have a daily dose of data. So every Wednesday I work with the communications officer from 4TU, Deirdre Casella, and we tweet about the most recent data sets that have been deposited under a CC0 or CC BY license. And then these tweets are also shared within the community news channel on Slack. So we hope to reach a diverse audience and raise awareness about data sharing practices. And then my final slide is just to let you know about a community call event. So we have our first community call next Friday at 10:30 Central European Time, where we'll be introducing the community. We'll have a round of updates from the leads of the working groups. And we've also got our guest speaker, Malvika Sharan, to talk about building a culture of collaboration. So Malvika is from the Turing Way. If you'd like to know more about this event or register, then I will also share the link in the Google Doc, or you can visit via these slides or the platform. So on that note, I would like to thank everybody for listening. I have posted the quick links into the Google Doc, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions. So I will also stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Connie. Let's see, we have a couple questions in a few minutes. So let's start with, did the community working groups develop organically, or were they created based on themes and then promoted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they were quite organic. What we did initially was that the data stewards that were interested in actually formulating these groups came together, and then we just discussed some topics of interest. So what kinds of themes and concerns or questions that they would like to talk about as a group, essentially. So that's where these 3 working groups came up, because they were common across different disciplines. So I hope that answers the question.
All right. Are there ways that 4TU is measuring the success of these engagement activities?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's really hard to do that. I guess ultimately it would be nice to measure it through deposits in the repository and things like that, but it's very difficult to actually measure the success and the impact of the engagement without, maybe a good idea is to create surveys and ask the data stewards what they think of it. the regular working groups, also to reach out to researchers that are part of the community and see if they're benefiting from these kinds of engagement activities. But I also think we're only 6 months in, so maybe this is something that is indeed really important to think about over the next 6 months. So thank you for that.
And then finally, this is a pretty simple one. Oh, there's more coming in. Great. For the fellowship program, are they being embedded in the 4TU group, or are they being embedded in the research groups?
Yeah, so, well, do you mean research? This question's a bit difficult because we're working out at the moment whether these should be fellows that are from any institution around the world that want to participate, or whether they should just be from the partner institutions. So that would be Delft, Eindhoven, and Twente. And then within that, maybe it would be good to have fellows from particular research groups. So we still have to think a bit more about the scope of this program. What it means to become a fellow, what kind of activities would we expect a fellow to do, what kind of rewards and incentives would fellows get. So yeah, it's a good question, and I think it requires a bit more thought because it would be quite nice to have disciplinary fellows from different institutions.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Is data sharing now normalized across 4TU institutes, or do you still have researchers unwilling to share? And how do you tackle this if that's true?
Again, this is a very challenging question to answer because it's not, I don't think, maybe some of the data stewards would have a different perspective on this than me, as they're also points of contact for researchers and deal directly with researchers about data more than I do. I would say that it is improving all the time. Data sharing is becoming more normal. And please correct me, Esther and Yasmin, if you're in this room in the chat, if you want to also add anything to this answer. But I would say that it requires a lot more work. There's people that also can't share data. So it's not just a case of that they're unwilling to share, but also that they collect confidential or commercially sensitive data, so they can't share, or they work with collaborators that are unwilling to share. So I think it's quite a complex scenario, really, and it's not easy to fix, but I think it's improving.
All right. Anonymous Otter is typing right as we speak.
Okay, good.
Are data stewards full-time employees that this is their only job?
Yes, that's right. At the 4TU technical universities, that is the case, that they are full-time embedded within their faculties and departments. And as you could see from the slide where I showed the overview, some of them are embedded in more than one department, which is quite a challenge. So it is a full-time position. But there are cases, and particularly in the Netherlands at Wageningen that I know, where the data stewards are researchers that have data stewardship roles sort of a couple of hours a week. So the models, as we know, of data stewardship are very diverse.
All right, I think we have time for one last question from Anonymous Coyote. Have you gotten any feedback from data depositories about the data portal?
Yes, when we do have one-to-one engagement with the data stewards, so data stewards, researchers. So when I interview or chat with researchers that have used the repository, I do always try and collect feedback on how easy it was to use, what could we improve, what new features would they like to see. And this is also where the GitLab and GitHub integrations have come about, because this was actually a growing demand from the research community that are using the repository. So we try and collect feedback and try and meet the needs of researchers as much as possible, and also take heed of any negative or issues. It's always important as well.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Connie. I really appreciate it. And again, if anybody would like to get a hold of Connie's slides, that's in the collaborative notes. Feel free to add more questions there throughout the rest of our session. I'm sure Connie will be checking on those as well. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. I would like to pass the baton, as it were, off to Joanne for our first keynote or task force update. I forgot to do our let's get to know each other. If we have time at the end, we'll do that. It was fun. I had a pizza question.
Do you want to do it now, Andrea?
No, that's okay. I'd rather get to know each other.
If you could put the slides up, though, that would be great.
There we go. I'm looking at it, so they're up, right?
Oh, okay.
No, it's not actually. There we go.
So, okay, thanks, Andrea, for handing over. So I'm going to give the first update from one of the two task forces that we set up. So for those who are in our session during the plenary, I thought I'd just give a bit of background to where these task forces came from. So at the last plenary session in November 2020, we had some breakout groups, and we talked about what we could produce as a group that would help each other, or help the RDA community engage with researchers at their own institution. And I've put a link in the slides for anyone who wants to look back at those notes as to what we discussed last November. And so we had ideas from the breakout groups, and then when we came back into the plenary session to discuss what we'd each been talking about, there was a common interest expressed in having a toolkit specifically to help us with online engagement. And obviously this was very timely. Many of us had been in lockdown, working from home for about 6 months at that point, and we'd started to get used to the idea of working from home and working online, but we were all still trying to figure out how to do that in the best way. So that was agreed that we would start to work on such a toolkit. And so starting in January this year, a subgroup of the co-chairs got together. That was myself, Connie, who you just heard from, Brianna, and James. We just got together online and started to think about what such a toolkit might look like, and to bring together our ideas on how we might do this. And so now we're at the next plenary in April 2021, and we wanted to present to you the kind of framework we've created at the moment for building this online engagement toolkit, and to ask now, we're almost ready to get your input to help us developing that. So next slide, Andrea, thanks. So the toolkit, we had to do some thinking at the beginning as to what a toolkit might look like. So we had in the back of our minds the cookbook that we'd helped develop and produce, and that's a collection of case studies of real life engagement with researchers. So we looked at that for inspiration, and we thought that we could do something to develop this idea of the cookbook. And so we came up with this kind of definition of what a toolkit for online engagement might be. And I'll just read that out for you, the draft or the working definition that we have at the moment. So the online engagement toolkit attempts to take theory into practice with regards to online engagement around RDM topics by offering suggestions on what tools might be useful, whether software, online materials or formats, and then giving examples of how these tools can be used to facilitate online engagement with researchers and with the RDM support community. Through a selection of shared materials and case studies, we look at how these tools are being used in practice. So by having this kind of working definition of what the toolkit might be, we broke that down into three sections, if you like. So first, a collection of tools and resources that people are already using or that others could use to help them create an online engagement event. And then some guidance on how to use these tools and resources depending on the aims of engaging, the conditions and the constraints. So we're not sure how to do this yet, but that's something we'll discuss as the work goes on. But we were thinking something like maybe as we presented things in the cookbook, maybe using icons to identify which tools are useful in which circumstances, or some kind of flow chart that would say, if this is the kind of activity you want to organise, then leading you through to look at what options there are, what tools are available. And then finally, a collection of case studies from you of how people are actually engaging. So like those presented in the cookbook, but obviously this time we'll be looking at really online activities and virtual engagement. And so those would be presented for inspiration to us all when we're thinking about new activities. Next slide. So far, what we did to get to this point was to start looking at what tools were out there that we were aware of and that we were using. So we collected these tools and we've now started putting them into a framework within a Google document for now, so that we can give it some structure. And so we've gathered the tools at the moment under 7 headings. And the first of these is the foundations of engagement. So anyone coming new to a role in engaging with researchers has some kind of background on what we're talking about. What is engagement with researchers in the first place? So here we would list, for example, the Toolkit. Liba has produced some 6 pillars for engaging, and any other resources that you can suggest that introduce the concept of what we mean by engaging with researchers. And then we've got a list of some existing guides and documents and websites that give some general tips on online engagement. So not specifically for RDM, but things like how to set up a virtual event, how to factor in breaks, how to make sure you include everyone in the audience. So real general tips for online engagement activities. Then we move a bit more into more specific RDM engagement. So we have started to collect the kinds of tools that we are using, and say we want to add to these with your input. So tools that you might be using for polling, for setting up quizzes, for brainstorming, or any other kind of activity that you've found successful. These might be tools that hopefully are free to some people, but we discussed the idea of making some things that people could use for free, but there might be ways you can use them if you do pay, but it would still serve both people, the people who can pay for them and the people who can't, and how you can use those. And then we looked at some tools for the administration of events. So here we're looking at things like example codes of conduct, registration tools, promotional tools, etc. Then we've got a list of resources for opportunities for engagement. So things you can hook your event onto. So here we're looking at things like the Love Data Week, for example, and how you can then build that and use surf on the wave of other events to promote your own event. We've also got some novel formats, and by this we thought there are some things that are worth drawing more attention to. So rather than just have a meeting with researchers where you might present something, discuss something, have a data conversation, and do things in a fairly traditional way, there are some other events that are more novel, and we thought it was worth highlighting some of these. So here we're looking at things like the Repro Hack format, or the use of games to engage and discuss RDM with researchers. And then finally, we have a collection of materials about how you can share your own materials. And we thought this would be useful because it would give people encouragement to share their materials, but then also give you clues as to where to look to find shared materials as well. So it has a dual purpose, if you like. So that's the kind of structure and framework we're working under. It is a draft, and I say if you can help us by suggesting materials, it might be that we break this into further headings or subdivisions as we collect more resources. But this is to give you an idea of where we're going with this at the moment. Andrea, next slide, please. So just a word about what we don't want to cover. As I mentioned, the tips for general engagement is something that we found there's many resources out there already. So we're not going to get into that, but we will link to some of these that we thought were most useful. Secondly, when it comes to teaching, we realised there might be an overlap between teaching and engaging. And so we would probably touch on this, but we're aware of other groups and projects working on producing a collection of teaching materials that can be shared. And so we thought we'd try and leave that to these other groups and then just link to their resources, and hopefully we can get them to link to ours as well when it's complete. So what we're really trying to focus on are the tools that will help you organise engagement activities with researchers about RDM. So that's really the core of what we're aiming for with the toolkit. Next slide. So how can you contribute? Well, I have 4 suggestions for ways that we hope you will contribute. And bear in mind that the toolkit is a work in progress. It's built by the community for the community. So we welcome your contribution, whatever that is. Never feel you're criticising. We always welcome any productive suggestions. So it's intended for us to help each other. So bear that in mind, and really please feel free and welcome to put any kinds of suggestions or contribute in any way you can. So the first way that you might like to do that is to suggest tools, tips, links to materials that you've discovered or created that are useful for online engagement. If you don't have any, but you have questions for the community, you can also share those and see if anyone can answer those kind of questions. And to collect this input, we're finalising a Google document into which you can add your suggestions, and then we'll have an editing team who brings it together and develops the input and streamlines that into a document. So we'll be ready to share that, I hope, a few weeks after the plenary, so look out for that on the RDA mailing list. That's the first way. The second way, if you can go to the next slide, Andrea, is I'm also interested. We're part of a worldwide community, and I know that for some people, English is not their first language, and it's not even the way they work with their researchers necessarily. So if you would like to, in parallel, develop a translation of the toolkit for your own language community, then I welcome you to get in touch with me, and we can give you access to the materials we have now, and we can then coordinate with you. And if you develop that in parallel, maybe we can launch them at the same time or shortly after the English version is available. And so you're very welcome to work on that. It will be CC BY, I imagine, license, so it will be always open for anyone to translate how they see fit. The third way is that you can package up and share your own materials or a summary of an activity so that we can link to that. Now, we don't have a website on the RDA site that's very useful for doing this kind of thing, for collecting stories and links. So we encourage you to publish wherever you want, for example, on your own website or via blog. Or if you want to package anything up and put it in Zenodo, that's also maybe a nice place, but that's just an example. And we'll talk about whether we can make some suggestions for metadata that might then help those resources to be more easily found by everyone. I know lots of communities are struggling with how to share materials in this way, so we don't have a perfect solution, but we'll try and bring together as much as we can and share it. And what I'm talking about here, when I say your own materials, what I was thinking of was it might be an agenda, a list of topics that you're discussing, a quiz that you've run successfully with someone, some quiz questions. So anything like this that you think could save someone else some time or inspire them to create their own event. And lastly, the fourth way that you can contribute is to share details of a case study of an example of engagement activity that you have delivered or you are in the process of delivering. And for that, we're creating a survey, and you can look out for the link to that shortly after the plenary, I hope. Again, we'll send it through our mailing list, so you can register for our group on the RDA website, and then you'll get mails from us. And we're going to try and follow up with the cookbook contributors, that's a difficult thing to say, to find out if those activities are taking place online, and if not, why not, and try and do some follow-up there in parallel. But we're really keen to hear about new case studies and new examples, new people who perhaps weren't involved in the cookbook at all. So we're keen to hear of any examples for a nice range of activities. And depending on the number of case studies that we find and the range of examples, we will again discuss in the task force how best to share those. So we're not sure how that will look yet, whether it will be something like the cookbook, some kind of document with links, or whether we share it in a novel way, for example, through podcasts. And that's where I would like to hand over to Shannon and Brianna, who are in the podcast task force, who can tell you a bit more about that.
Thank you for the excellent segue there, Joanne. Andrea, can we get to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I will be giving the update for the task force that is working on the podcast. It will be a little bit shorter than Joanne's because we just don't quite have as much content yet. So Brianna and I have been meeting and chatting to talk about the podcast output. And we have kind of come to some decisions on the format, the target audience, what it's going to kind of look like. So we have a tagline of highlighting data engagement initiatives for the busy professional. And so our target audience for this podcast is basically you guys, basically data professionals who are engaging with researchers in the realms of research data management and curation, and are interested in learning about what other people in that arena are doing. The frequency, we're shooting and hoping for about once a month. And the structure of the podcast is going to be more as an interview, a little bit more casual than you might encounter in like a formal publication, a blog post, a lightning session, presentation at a conference. Basically an opportunity for us to sit down and chat with practitioners about the whole rigmarole of whatever initiative they were working on. So the stuff that worked really well, the stuff that maybe did not work quite so well, so that they can share their wisdom and experience and advice for others that might be able to use or adapt initiatives in their own local institution. For each episode, we would be focusing just on one project/presenter, as opposed to doing, really big roundtables, so that we could focus just in on that one initiative and get all of the details that we can from that. And we're looking for about 30 minutes in terms of length, so trying to keep them more on the shorter side, because our idea was that, I'm sure a lot of you listen to podcasts, whether they're professional or whether they're just for pleasure. But, those short little bites that maybe you can listen to it when we're commuting again, on a commute or on your afternoon walk, kind of another way of getting information out there that doesn't require someone to, sit at a screen for another 30 minutes while they're reading it. In terms of the production, we're still working out the actual process of how we're going to be making it. But I know at my university, we actually have a podcasting studio, which is one of the reasons that, there we go, sorry, which is one of the reasons that, I was really interested in working on this task force. And so we have access to a lot of resources, and we have been talking to people and researching, kind of best practices for creating a podcast in terms of the production. We will hopefully, this is next step, so I'll save that to the end. The one big thing, if anybody is really interested or has any great ideas, if you will notice, this slide is just titled The Podcast, and that is because we do not have a name for it yet. I am not particularly good at making up puns or catchy titles. So if anybody here has an idea for a name, has several ideas for a name, feel free to pop them in the chat or in the Google Doc. Basically, yes, as Brianna mentioned in the chat, feel free to put them in the notes as well. We would love your input. And the other ask that we have for people, which in addition to if you have an idea for a name, are guest recommendations. So we've started making a list of people that we think might be interested in talking to us about projects that they have published in some venue. As I think it was Joanna mentioned, we also would be interested in getting in touch with people who have produced from the cookbook. But the idea of this podcast is also to go beyond, that initial group of initiative creators and kind of search far and wide for people who might be interested in sharing the initiatives that they're working on. So if you have anybody that you think you would be interested in hearing from, if you have an idea that you would like to talk about on the podcast, feel free to self-nominate on page 5 of the notes. Because the goal is to give people a venue, not only to highlight things that maybe have been published elsewhere, but maybe it's an initiative that, to you doesn't seem like you want to go through the effort of publishing it formally in some way. So still being able to share those smaller initiatives as well. We think the podcast can be a really great format for that, so that you're still getting those small initiatives out there in some way so that others might be able to learn from them. So for our next steps, between now and the next plenary, the plan is to work through, start contacting some of the potential guests, and hopefully get a pilot kind of going and run through that, and then hopefully even an episode or 2 before we meet for the next plenary, so that we can have an actual output that people can listen to, provide feedback on. And so in addition to, guest recommendations, any name ideas, if you have any really strong feelings about any of the things that I talked about here, the target audience, the structure, feel free to put that feedback in the Google Doc as well. So the next slide, please. So now this is how to get involved for both, and Joanna and I have both said it a couple of times. The best way to kind of get involved is to put suggestions or your email addresses onto the shared notes document. There are spaces on there for both the task force and the podcast, so you don't have to put your name down for both, whatever you are interested in. And if you have questions or want more information, there is some space on the shared notes document to put that. Or you can feel free to get in touch with the contact person for each of the task forces, which are also, our emails are also on those shared notes. So yeah, that's my short little update on the podcasts. And then I think next up we've got lightning talk. So I will turn it over to whoever's going to be running the first one, Eva, right?
Thank you, Shannon.
I saw there were some questions in the document. Do we have time to address those very quickly?
We have about 3 minutes. So
yeah, because I can address some of these. So one was how teaching and engagement overlap, and I thought it was worth saying something about that, because I think what we're trying to do with the toolkit is to what I think would be useful when we're talking about teaching is to look at how you engage during the teaching session. And that's the kind of thing I would be interested in finding more out about. So not just we're doing some teaching on data management planning, but how do you introduce the topic other than just showing some slides? Is it do you have activities, exercises that you can do online? And so that's a kind of small difference between what we want to do with not just teaching resources, slide sets and documents, but really methods of engaging people in the topic in an interesting way. So that's one thing I think we're interested in. And when it comes to the other languages, yeah, sure, at the moment, I think I'm happy to collect resources, tools, ideas in other languages. And we could put those in a kind of appendix under different language materials. And then we can see if we have enough French materials and someone willing to take that on, maybe we can develop a full French translation that focuses more on those French resources or Spanish resources or whatever. So definitely we can collect them for now, and then look at how we bring those together. And someone's put a suggestion: how do you entice data producers to attend the engagement activities? I hadn't thought about that, but I think that might be something we could add as a separate section. I see where you're getting at with that question, and I think it's a good idea to add something. So we'll take that idea and put something in as well. And hopefully, I do know of some people who have done nice things to engage, to entice researchers to join, whether that's sending little parcels through the post, or doing some kind of Twitter storm to get people along. So we'll look at some of those ideas. Indeed, treats, data and donuts, I saw, yes. So that's a good idea. We'll take that and add that. Thanks for the suggestion. Okay. I think I've addressed all the questions that are in the document, but I'll write answers in the document as well. And then if anyone has any more questions or suggestions, feel free to add them as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
everyone.
Joanne. All right, Ava, take it away. Do you need me to stop sharing this slide?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Thank you. So now we have our lightning talks, in total 4 presentations, and we are going to start with a presentation from Shelley Stoll and Alison Specht, with the title Changing the Data Sharing Culture, Researchers and What Matters. Shelley is the Senior Director for the American Geophysical Union's Data Leadership Program. She has diverse experience that includes working as a program and project manager, software architect, and database architect. And she is the country and data team leader for the United States and project co-PI in the Parsec project, building new tools for data sharing and reuse through a transnational investigation of the socioeconomic impacts of protected areas. Alison is an environmental scientist with broad expertise in research, teaching, community engagement, data management, and the preservation of archival data. And since 2020, she has held an advisory position with Turn as an ecosystem research analyst, and she is a project co-PI in the Parsec project. So, please feel free to write in the chat should you not be able to hear the audio or should there be any other problems.
Thank you for the opportunity to give this lightning talk. I'm one of the PIs for the Parsec project. Alison Specht is also another PI, along with, she's attending RDA along with Nicolas Moquette and David Mouillot from France. And we've been working for a couple years on challenges around changing the culture for data management and data sharing, trying to integrate fair practices and reproducibility within our Belmont Forum grant. We're also funded, Belmont Forum has 29 country participants, and for this particular grant, we are also funded by FAPESB out of Brazil, JST from Japan, ANR from France, and the National Science Foundation from the United States. So I just wanted to share with you, the Parsec project has a number of objectives, but one that's really important is building content or identifying existing content that's appropriate to expose researchers to, so that they can start to make adjustments within how they handle data management. And one of the things we noticed when we first started out is that a lot of the content either had an informatics component to it that made vocabulary really difficult, or it wasn't really or coming from the researchers community indicating that this was important. So since then, a number of efforts to work on this challenge have been in play, and I believe this interest group is focused, and I'm very interested in your feedback. So for Parsec, this is my only slide. I just wanted to share for Parsec, we have 2 focus areas that we've been working on. One is targeting principal investigators, essentially the decision makers for the research, helping them realize what those data management or software management decisions are during the project, and also for preservation, giving them processes that come from RDA work, come from Force 11 work, on how to make those decisions in vocabulary that we hope is useful for them, and then how to enforce those decisions. You know, you don't just put them into a data management plan, you actually incorporate those activities into your daily working life with your team, and then it becomes something very easy. And then what are the benefits of those good decisions? What, you know, by treating data and software as an asset to your project, it means that you are valuing the time it took to create that data and its value to not only your research, but future research. And then for researchers, just trying to identify what makes most sense for them, reducing duplicative work, making it easier for publication, by citing data and software. There's research out there about increasing citations for your own publications, and of course, complying with funder mandate. I'll stop here. My time is almost up, but our project is very open to understanding the existing content that's out there and incorporating that with full attribution. And we're excited to hopefully learn from others who are speaking today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking more.
Thank you for your attention. Next up, we have Dr. Sarah King with Managing Active Research Data. Dr. Sarah King is the Training and Engagement Lead for RRNet. She is focused on outreach within the research sector and on developing communities of interest around training, outreach, and skills development in e-research. Oh, 1 second, that was the wrong window. So here you go.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah King and I'm the Training and Engagement Lead at RNet. RNet is a not-for-profit organisation owned by Australian universities and research institutions. We provide a high-speed network for universities to connect researchers. We also provide cloud storage known as Cloud Store and other network services such as Zoom. Today, I'm going to talk about the training we offer to universities about active research data management so that researchers and research support staff can make the most of our research-focused services. Cloud Store is RNet's file sync, share, and storage service, offering solutions for researchers throughout the research data lifecycle. Cloud Store is an online environment with cloud file storage, quick and secure file transfer with no file size restrictions with a tool called File Sender, an open source Office documents capability called OnlyOffice that allows for collaborative editing in a wide range of document types directly into the Cloud Store portal, and something called Swan, which is the service for web-based analysis. And this allows users to run and write Jupyter notebooks to analyze data that's held in Cloud Store. The training approach I use is based on the carpentry style. It's with small groups online using the tools along with the instructor with step-by-step instructions, and it's interspersed with conversations, questions, and activities. I mostly work in a train-the-trainer situation for research support staff. However, I've also run similar workshops for webinars and webinars for researchers. One of the hallmark elements of library carpentries is jargon busting, and this is the first part of the Managing Active Research Data workshops I facilitate. It's a list, or here's a list of the terms that we go through in small groups. writing descriptions and definitions of each of these terms in a collaborative document to ensure that everyone has the correct concept of these particular terms in the context. And I find this to be an excellent way to start the workshop, both as an icebreaker and as a way to get people to focus on the matter at hand. It's also a really important step for helping participants to feel confident that they'll be able to handle the experience that they're about to have. So here are the main topics of the workshops, which are usually 3-hour hands-on interactive sessions. I have done one in person, which is great, but they're usually on Zoom. We go through these high-level themes relating to research data management, the research data lifecycle, data movement, syncing, sharing and storing data in the cloud, and also just talking about what the cloud is. Dealing with backups and emergencies, this is usually a pretty surprising one, and that includes how to make a backup plan, the 3-2-1 rule, and if there's time, I like to also have some discussion around data sovereignty and sensitive data. And yeah, the training is fairly slow and it's meant to be interactive. We want to have this discussion because often it's one institution at a time. That's what I prefer. And that way we can embed local requirements, share the resources and help participants understand where CloudStore and AARNet sit amongst a sea of other options and solutions. And we finish up with a few challenges for the participants to work on. You can see a couple of them here. And this is a way of wrapping up and giving people the tools so they know how to respond to some of the challenges that they might have thrown at them over the course of their research or their work with researchers. All of the material that I use is open source, and I share that with all of the people that are in the workshop. I'm absolutely happy to share it with anyone here if you're interested. And I would like to acknowledge the valuable contributions of Dr. Brian Dawson-Stanton from Macquarie University, as the workshop was co-developed as a concept with him. We piloted it in April last year. I've continued then to shape and deliver it since. And just as an aside, the workshops are all free for AARNet member institutions. So thanks very much for having me. Thanks for your time.
Another great presentation. And next up, we have Esther Plomp with her presentation titled The Carpentries Online. Esther is the data steward of the Faculty of Applied Sciences at the Delft University of Technology. As a data steward, she supports researchers with their data and code management, facilitates researchers in making their data fair, and answers questions about open science practices. Her expertise includes research data management, isotope archaeology, biological anthropology, geochemistry, and others. So, please enjoy.
Hello everyone. I'm Esther Plomp and I'm a data steward at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. I support researchers there with their data and code management and open science practices. And in this respect, I would like to discuss with you today how we took the Carpentries workshops online. So the Carpentries workshops are workshops that teach researchers coding and data science skills, which is a global initiative. We have been teaching primarily beginner programming workshops, and all of the materials of the Carpentries are available online on the website that is listed on the slides. Importantly, these workshops also follow a code of conduct, which ensures that all these workshops are inclusive and provide a supporting environment for researchers to learn coding skills. As everyone, we have suffered from the pandemic and had to take these workshops online since July 2020. And since then, we have held a genomics data carpentry, a social science data carpentry together with Leiden University. And we've been hosting several software carpentry workshops, listing the following topics: Python, Git, GitHub, and Unix shell. And the next workshop will take place in June. And if you would like to join as an observer, please get in touch through the email address listed on the slides. For these online workshops, we've had an average amount of learners between 20 and 27, which was quite manageable once you are adjusted to the online organization. We are thinking of scaling it up to 30 participants in total. In terms of organization, we have about 2 to 3 instructors per workshop, which are not always present at the same time, but we do have multiple instructors. We also have multiple helpers. We have about 1 helper per 5 to 8 participants. We also have a code documenter. This is someone who follows along with the programming of the instructors. And this provides a complete overview of all the commands used by the instructor. This also ensures that if anyone disconnects or if their internet connection drops out for a bit, they can always go back to this overview in order to catch up again. We also have 1 Zoom DJ, which is the facilitator of the session, which ensures that everything runs according to the program, make sure all the questions are answered or answered by the helpers, and addresses any technical issues, and is also setting up breakout rooms, for example, because we have been hosting these workshops through Zoom. An important change in the program is that they're currently taking place during 4 mornings or afternoon sessions instead of 2 full days, which was the case for physical workshops. We are currently trying to extend the program a little bit because online workshops always take longer. So we have been having some time issues in previous workshops. So we are still learning and adjusting and improving the program accordingly. And we are hopefully bringing out a blog post about our experiences so that you can also learn from there. And if you would like to learn more, have any more questions, you can always get in touch. But also if you would like to share your experiences, because we're very much interested in improving our workshops. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. And now to our last lightning talk by Raman Ganguly with the title EOSC Task Forces. Raman is the leader of the Software Design and Development Department at the Vienna University Computer Center and is an expert in software development and media technology. He is devoted to digital archivation of data from a technical perspective. And he is also the leader of the repository of the University of Vienna FEDRA and participates in various national and international projects.
Welcome to my talk. I'd like to give you a brief information about the European Open Science Cloud, which is an initiative which has a big impact on the European research landscape and also on the research data management in Europe. First of all, the name is a little bit misleading. It is not a cloud, it's more or less an umbrella which brings research infrastructure and research organization together, which are all financed by the European Commission. All these initiatives should have the same idea and follow a funding stream which all enables researcher in Europe to have a digital data market, and there the data can be shared openly over this European Open Science Cloud. This started in 2014, where in the European Commission, the people came together and think about how the finance of research infrastructure can be efficient. For these, they have the idea to bring all the relevant infrastructures and players together and make them to work together so that the researchers can benefit more. In 2018, the European Open Science Cloud was launched in Vienna, Austria, politically, where all the member states have been participate and opened the European Open Science Cloud. In the year 2020, the European Open Science Cloud have got a legal entity in Brussels, which is driven by members. In this European Open Science Cloud, which are brand new, the European Commission now wants to create all the infrastructure and all the new efforts on research data management and on data-driven research. For these, they implement advisory groups, and I show you here all the advisory groups, which are then there inside of the advisory groups have some task forces. One of them is implementation of the European Open Science Cloud, which have the relevant task force for us, researcher engagement. And the second very interesting advisory group, also in context of engaging researcher with data, is researcher careers and curricula. This task force is data steward, curricula, and career path. So in all these advisory groups, you have more task forces. These will be very relevant, and I hope I can give you in short future by new plenary more updates what happened with the European Open Science Cloud. Thank you.
Perfect. And with that, I'd like to hand back over to Andrea. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, Eva. Those were excellent. Thank you for coordinating those. And thank you to all the presenters of the lightning talks. Those are very interesting and really helpful to have some great ideas for my own programs. So instead of doing this at the beginning, we're going to wrap up by getting to know each other. I'm going to share a screen again. If you can all go to Mentimeter. Sorry. If you can go to Mentimeter, and here's the code, and start filling that out, then I will be able to get the and start with that first question, please. Then I will be able to get this up so we can all see who we are and what we're doing. All right, so in the room, we've got librarians, data stewards, administrators. Feel free to put in the chat if I've forgotten any role and you don't feel that you're covered. No funders in the room. Interesting. Mikia, thank you. Community managers. We have at least one community manager. Trainers, okay. A data archivist. I should have put archivists after librarians, I'm sorry. Excellent, I'll give about 10 more seconds and then we'll move on to the next slide. Yeah, there's lots of different terminology for about the same things. All right, so it looks like we're fairly evenly split between librarians and data stewards. At least that's what we're calling ourselves. Let's see if I can move to the next slide. Next, maybe. There we go. All right, next, what sort of institution are you employed at? And again, if I have missed it, please put it another institution type in the chat. Academic. All right. For the person listing the NGO or nonprofit, if you don't mind outing yourself in the chat, is it an NGO or a nonprofit focused on data? Is it focused on research itself? Just out of curiosity. All right, another 10 seconds or so and we'll move to the next. All right, so mostly at academic institutions, not super surprising. You can let us know your location. Oh, the Finns. We have so many of you today. Excellent. And probably a lot of this has to do with the time this is on. We are mostly focused on Europe, some from North America, somebody from Australia. Thank you for being up. And I have one last question, and this one is definitely the most important question to get to know everyone. I'd like you all to rank these 10 different pizza toppings in order from your favorite to your least, 1 being your favorite, 10 being your least favorite. These are the top 10 toppings from the United States. I went with that. I'm being America-centric, sorry. But there's definitely about 4 of these that I would just never even have them come close to my own pizzas. Pineapple's that high, guys? Oh. We literally have 1 more minute of this. And I just want to say that I really appreciate everyone coming. We had just under 100 visitors at one point in time. We may have had more. We didn't catch those. And thank you for playing along with this. We really would love to see your engagement on the notes page. Keep an eye out on the listserv emails. If you are not a member of this interest group yet, you can join that through the RDA website, and then you would automatically get all of our emails that has updates on our task force and when we're requesting participation and the like. But thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you being here. And I'm really glad to see that mushrooms are the top pizza topping for everyone in this session. It is. And that pineapple dropped so far. But again, thank you so much.